So today we're going to talk about the value of creating an academic plan. I always say that you're not going to become an engineer by accident, that becoming an engineer and finishing the curriculum is a planning process. And so we always want you to be thinking a few steps ahead. So we're going to walk through how to create a plan in Oasis. Oasis is our advising tool that we use in order to collect your academic record information. So that's where you'll see your registered courses. That's where you'll see your grades when they become available. That's where you can engage with advisors with your plan, petition any forms that need to be submitted. Oasis can do a lot, and we'll talk a little bit about what the opportunities are for that tool. And then if you're thinking about potentially changing your major or you're just unsure, we'll also talk about how to plan ahead for those things, because big decisions require big plans. So we want to make sure you have everything that you need to transition successfully if that's what you intend to do. All right, so creating an academic plan is something that you'll hear over and over and over again in the College of Engineering. We always want students to have a 3-quarter plan, recognizing though that things may change, right? Your circumstances might change. The College of Engineering has a lot of prerequisites. We want you to be successful in every next step that you take. And the College of Engineering curriculum very quickly can become complex with the different types of really cool opportunities to combine multidisciplinary studies and apply them in really cool ways. But that means building a really strong foundation with many prerequisites so that you have the wealth of knowledge that you need in order to combine those concepts and apply them at a high level. So what you'll see is that many classes require previous coursework or experience in order to be successful in those. We have a prerequisite checking tool within Schedule Builder that will often stop you if the system does not recognize a prerequisite. So we'll talk about how to navigate those issues in a future webinar. But just keep in mind that a lot of information is available about each course, and so you'll want to make sure you know what any prerequisites might be. Not every class is offered every quarter, and what we want to do is take the classes that are most important to your progress and put them in a combination that is realistic given everything else that will be going on in your life as a student. So prioritization from our perspective is really important. We want to put the first things first. If something is a prerequisite and will be something that prevents you from moving on, we're going to make that a priority. And if something is a degree requirement, but maybe not a prerequisite for anything, we might make that a lower priority in terms of how we're choosing courses. What we see is a lot of new students are really excited to do all the things all at once. And what we might want to do is be intentional about how we're choosing and combining courses so that it makes it a little bit easier. Do we have any questions yet?
Not yet. We don't have questions.
Okay. Okay. So if anyone has any questions about any of the material that we've covered so far, feel free to use that Q&A tool, and then Lisa will be shouting those out for me. Okay, so we talked about Oasis. And Oasis is a great portal that gives you access to a lot of really interesting information, including your advising contacts, important quarter dates that might be coming up, your academic record, your advising record, degree worksheets, forms and petitions, and GPA charts and tools. Today, we're going to be focusing on the forms and petitions. So under forms and petitions, when you open that tab, you're going to see that it defaults to My Forms. Well, if you haven't created a 3-quarter plan yet, you probably don't have anything listed. So you'll want to go over to the Submit a New Form button. And when you do that, it will give you a long list of different forms that you can start. Today, what we're going to be doing is talking about that very first option, the academic plan. When you open a new academic plan, it's going to be blank if you have not yet registered for any courses. Once you start registering for courses, those courses will automatically fill in these different slots by quarter. Once those are completed, they will show up as a sort of historical log for that time. But we're going to be building an academic plan, usually that includes fall, winter, and spring, and then can be revised as you go through those experiences. So what you may have questions about right now are things like AP credit or IB credit, even A-level credit, understanding how that credit might be applied and impacting the courses that you're going to be taking in fall quarter. So this might be a great time to use the chat to let us know how many of you have already done your Aggie advising and know what you're going to be registering for fall. So go ahead and take a moment. Yay! All right. Few people have. Excellent, excellent.
Maybe people can raise their hands too, Jordan.
Oh, raise hands. That's a great way to do it. Okay, cool. Oh, look at that.
Look at it. Yay.
Yay. Excellent. All right. Mostly. All right. Perfect. All right, three-quarter plan is a great way to start your academic year, but just recognize that these things are going to be potentially flexible based on what you are experiencing. Oh, good question. I got a question that to clarify the difference between Aggie 101 and Aggie advising. So Aggie 101 is the overall tool that we wanted all students to have experience with, just to give you sort of a lay of the land, an online orientation, if you will. Aggie advising is a follow-up appointment with an advisor in the college to talk about your goals and your specific interests so that then we can tailor a recommended academic plan for fall or the first 3 quarters, depending on how time allows. So if you haven't yet connected one-on-one with an advisor, I would encourage you to go ahead and make an appointment to do so, because you may have some questions or they may have some feedback based on what you're planning for registration that will be coming up in a few weeks. Good question. So another question was, if you only had time for fall quarter, is it a problem not to have winter and spring planned out as well? It's not a problem yet. What you'll want to do is make sure you keep in touch with your advisor so that before your registration period for winter, you know exactly what you're planning to take. So no stress there.
And Jordan, we have a couple more questions.
Oh, great, more questions.
So one is, how will minors be incorporated into our plan and when do we declare one?
Excellent questions. So minor requirements vary from minor to minor. Some minors have a lot of lower division prerequisites, and let me back up and say lower division classes are those numbered 0 to 99. Those are usually taken by first and second years. Some lower division classes may have prerequisites, but others may not. So you would want to look at the individual course descriptions to figure out, is it critical that these courses be taken early, or is it something that can be postponed? Minors that have lots of prerequisites and you're already aware of wanting to complete them should be incorporated as soon as possible. It goes back to that priority question though. We don't want your minor to get in the way of your progress with your major. So we will want to be very, very strategic about when those classes are incorporated, because if a class that you need for your minor is only available in fall quarter, but you already have a full schedule with your fall quarter major classes, you might be looking at adding it in the following fall. So there are some strategies there in terms of when and how and in what combination you will want to incorporate those minor classes. Some minors offer all their classes over the summer. So you could keep your major academic plan through the academic year and just take classes toward your minor during the summer. It really just depends on the minor, and it depends on what your goals are.
Okay, and another question, if we'll go with that, is what's the difference between a major advisor and a college advisor?
Great question. So major advisors are absolute specialists in the department that they work in. They know the curriculum inside and out, but they may not have as much awareness or knowledge in depth as someone in a different department about a different major. So the college advisors are really here to work with you any step of the way as sort of a general support. So if a student is interested in potentially exploring other majors, if a student has a petition that needs to be reviewed, they would come to us. We also do a lot of first year advising. We know that the first year can create a lot of questions. And so what we want to do is give you support through your first year and make sure that you're feeling connected, especially if you have more general questions. So we're sort of the policy experts, where your department advisors are the curriculum experts. And frequently you'll be working with one or both, depending on your questions. But we work really closely together to make sure that you all have the best information and service available.
So Jordan, we have a couple more questions, but I feel like a couple of them might be answered as you go on. One is, how do we know which courses are offered which quarter, which when you show the live version of that would be helpful. And then the other question is, how can I petition to take a or can I petition to take a prerequisite at the same time as a class that requires it?
Very, very good questions. So if you are in a position where the prerequisite that you want to take is offered in the same quarter as the course that it is prerequisite for, depending on your previous experience and or depending on the professor's decision and or the advice of your advisors, it may not be suggested that you do that. But sometimes prerequisites are not necessarily captured in the system that is checking for the prerequisites. So if you have AP credit that just isn't showing, you may already have satisfied the prerequisite, but the system isn't recognizing that yet. That's a very specific question that would be specific to you and also specific to the course. So we would want to look a little bit deeper and more specifically to your question on a one-on-one basis, which is where the value of advising is. And we will be talking about how you can see which classes are available when. I'm going to do a live demonstration of filling out an academic plan, and we will be able to go through and see some of those flags that might show up. Okay. So in order to make a good plan, right, having a solid plan requires that you understand what should be on there. Learning about your major, learning about the individual course requirements for each major is really, really important. A great resource for that is going to be the catalog. So catalog.ucdavis.edu is, it used to be an old fat book about this big that sat on my desk, and it would fall apart with all of my thumbing through it. And now that it's digitally available, it's a lot easier to navigate. But that's where you'll see the official list of the courses that are required for your major. You also get to see the prerequisites for each course. So that is where you'll see a longer course description. It may give you information about when the course is offered or what the GE credit that you may receive from that course. But it lists for you the prerequisites. That information is also available when you see the course in Schedule Builder. So Schedule Builder is our tool that we use for the actual registration process. I sort of think of it as an online checkout service where you're putting classes into your basket, and that register button is sort of your purchase all. But the prerequisites should be listed by course, and you can see that statically in the catalog or dynamically in Schedule Builder. But once you know what the prerequisites are, you'll be able to see how the pieces of the puzzle fit together. And then entering your plan in Oasis allows you to see that in a bigger picture. You'll also find that your academic plan is something that will be referenced in future advising appointments. So it is really important that even if it's a draft, or even if you're very unsure about what your requirements should be, take your best guess. And then that's a great starting point for a conversation with your advisor. You'll see, if I go back to the previous slide, you'll see that there are 4 slots already sort of ready to be populated for each quarter. Those slots may only require 3 classes. Some may require 4. Don't feel pressured to fill each space if it is not advised that you do, because not each course is going to have the same unit value. So you might find that you're taking a couple of classes with very few units, while others might have 5 units, and so you would take fewer courses in that particular term. So we recommend that students are taking around 15 units per quarter as an average. You may have heard 15 to graduate in 4. And that's mathematically true. 180 units is achievable over 12 quarters. But what we want to do is make sure that you are taking the right units for you. So sometimes you might be taking 13 or 14 units. Other quarters you may be taking 16 or 17, depending on your experience and the coursework themselves. So that's where we can be really strategic about using your time. That also doesn't include any potential summer classes that you may be taking. So it's always helpful for us to know what your summer plans are, and then that way you can incorporate that as well. All right. Lisa, do we have more questions?
Yeah, the next question that we have is, how do we know what?
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm losing you. Can you repeat that?
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. It says, I've created a schedule of classes I plan to take. How do I tell that the classes I'm taking can be taken online? My major advisor says that 80% of the classes will be available online, but at the moment there is no mention of it if there will be online instruction will be available. Thanks.
That's a really great question. And right now we're waiting on more details about the courses for fall. If you went back to look at the classes that were offered in spring, you may have seen that some of them were shown as remote instruction, while others were shown to have a date, time, and location associated with them, even though all of our classes were online. The purpose of that is a couple of things. Even if a class is completely online, there may be times that required participation is expected. So having a specific lab time might mean that you're registering for a course that would require engagement at a particular time, even if it wasn't using a particular space. The other thing is that some classes have specific finals, and those finals cannot overlap with other courses. Otherwise, how are you going to take 2 finals at the same time, right? So our daytime structure prevents there to be any conflicts with final exams if the courses themselves do not conflict. Knowing that fall will be different from spring, that we will have some courses that were not available in spring because they were required to be in person. We have some really cool lab courses that we're not able to transition online. To make those courses available will require some creativity in the fall in terms of still adhering to any safety guidelines and health guidelines that are present, but still giving students that experience. So we as well are waiting for more details of what that looks like. The university is always balancing the student experience with their health and safety. And so we want to make sure that we're giving you as much experience as we can in as safe a way as possible. So stay tuned. If you find that in your Pass 1 registration time, you are unable to attend the courses that have in-person components, you can make changes to your schedule in Pass 2 or through the open registration periods. So if for some reason something doesn't work for you, it doesn't mean that's the only opportunity to make changes. You will have some time to make changes in the future if you've registered for a course that will be in a format that does not work for you. Did we have any other questions, Lisa?
I'm asking some of the panelists to answer them, typing the answer. And so I think go on, and then I'll interject when we have more. Yeah,
Great.
go ahead.
Okay. So for those of you who might be thinking about changing your major, the best thing to do is to start classes toward the major you're hoping for. What we want to do is, if you know what you want to do, start incorporating those prerequisites as early as possible. Some of those prerequisites, though, might be restricted to certain majors. And if you're not in one of those majors, you may not be able to register for that class during Pass 1, or you might not be able to register for it until open registration. It depends on how those restrictions are posted. So if there's a major that you're interested in, but you don't see available seats, that's also an opportunity for you to waitlist after Pass 2. So what we want to do is, as soon as you identify it, get you some experience in that area. I think experience is a really wonderful teacher. And so if you find that you take a course toward a major that you're interested in and you're really loving it, great, let's continue that path. But if experience shows you, wow, my interest might be elsewhere, great. It's a great time to find that out. So what you want to do is do some research into the change of major requirements for the major that you're interested in. When I started in the college several years ago, I felt like there was a lot of consistency across the campus, and our change of major requirements were probably some of the most complex. But now things have changed a lot, and different majors have different expectations for students who want to change in. So what you'll want to do is research. Look in the catalog. Again, that's catalog.ucdavis.edu. To see how those change of major requirements can be met. There's also a change of major form in Oasis that could give you some information. But more often than not, I also recommend talking to an advisor. The best way to get information relative to your specific situation is to sit down with a professional who can answer your specific questions. What you'll see is that there's not a one-size-fits-all for college. And so what we want to do is take into consideration your experience, your goals, and the context and structure of the university, and combine those into a way that you can move forward in the direction that you're interested. So it's a great way to initiate a conversation, is to set up an appointment with an advisor, either at our college level, in the department, or across campus, depending on the major that you're interested in.
Okay, so we have a couple more questions that are unrelated to the changing of the major, kind of,
Okay.
sort of.
No problem.
So one of the questions is about the hold, the immunization hold. So how does that affect students' registration? Does it affect for fall, just winter? So if you could kind of distinguish the difference between that.
Sure. Okay.
You're done answering that.
So back in April, the admissions staff notified our student health services of whose immunization records they received and whose they did not. If your immunization records were incomplete or not received, then you may have received a hold on your account. That hold, though, is not going to impact your fall registration. The university recognizes that that would be unrealistic to have you resolve all immunization holds prior to your arrival. But we do want those resolved as quickly as possible. So if you have a hold, it will impact your registration for winter, which might sound like a future problem that current you doesn't have to worry about. But I want to remind you that registration for each following term is about halfway through the term that you're in. So you will be registering for winter about halfway through fall. So if future you is waiting for later in fall to take care of that pesky hold, you will be unpleasantly surprised when you can't register for your winter courses. So we want to make sure that you have that hold resolved as quickly as possible. Work with student health to find out what's missing from your record. And I know that in certain locations, it can be difficult to get doctor's appointments. So just be aware of what the expectations and requirements are, and then work with student health to see if that's something that can be resolved when you come to campus, or if it needs to be resolved before you do. But it should not impact your fall.
Okay. We've got a few more questions. Do we want to answer the questions, or do you want to move on? How would you like to proceed?
let's see. I think we're pretty close to finishing up the slide portion, and then we'll
Okay.
be getting into the practicing of using the tool in Oasis. So the best resources for creating your academic plan is using that first quarter course recommendation tool for our freshman students. Check your department websites to understand the degree requirements as well as the catalog. And then check in with your academic advisors just to make sure that what you're planning is what is recommended. Okay. All right, I'm happy to answer some more questions.
Okay. A question, will it be feasible to take fall online in a different time zone where I'll be waking up at midnight to attend classes, or will there be recorded classes available? Great question.
Oh, that's a really great question. So the answer is maybe. I think it's a difficult question to answer, and it's something that I would be happy to meet with you and discuss in terms of the potential challenges and also benefits of taking classes from home. I've met with several students who were able to do so very successfully, and then I had others who had challenges with technology and time zones. So it really is a course by course basis that I would suggest that you look a little bit deeper into the participatory requirements. If you can find equal classes at different time zones or at different times that work better than midnight for you, I would encourage you to look at maybe some different course registration numbers for each section to see if the times align better. And that's assuming you have good access to technology. Some courses, like the ones that were offered in spring, may have been listed with a specific day and time, but those lectures may have been recorded, and maybe just labs required live participation. It really depends on the course. It really depends on the flexibility of the instructor. Our campus is encouraging that faculty use the maximum amount of flexibility, recognizing that there may be students taking classes from home, 10 minutes away or 10 hours away. So it really is a personal decision, and one that I would encourage you to do some more research about, and I'd be happy to help you with that process. So I didn't introduce myself properly at the beginning of this webinar to describe my role in the college. I specialize in working with our international student population. So I'm used to working with folks on all different time zones. So even if you're a US citizen residing in a different country, or one of our traditional international students, I'd be more than happy to talk with you about your options. So feel free to make a follow-up appointment.
Okay, a couple of things. One, just a reminder for folks that there's in the Q&A feature, you're welcome to answer your questions or ask your questions in there. In the answered feature, you can see what questions have already been answered. So just noting that. And the next question, the next two questions have to do with seat release, basically
Okay.
saying that they're seeing that some classes are full. What do I do?
Yeah.
How does that work?
Great question. And we'll go over this again in our schedule builder troubleshooting webinar, but it's a great question to think about now. So as you're planning, you're looking at classes and you're trying to find the ones with open seats. That's completely natural. But what you may not see are the courses that we are reserving for you on your behalf that are not visible yet. So just before your registration period, if you have an afternoon registration period, you will see your available seats at noon Pacific time. If you have an 8 a.m. registration period, then you will see your seat release, I think it's the night before. So you'll have a little bit of time to strategize planning. My recommendation is to have a few versions of your schedule built in Schedule Builder that may encompass different kinds of CRN numbers, so that if you have a section that fills up and there is a different section of a course that you need in your first quarter, you will be able to register for that section instead. So you will be able to see which seats you'll actually be registering for just before your actual registration time. And we keep those hidden so that no one takes them from you.
Great. Another question, what if our country doesn't allow us to go into the US for winter quarter?
That's a great question that we'll want to answer as we get a little closer to winter. I think a lot of our conversations right now are around clarifying for fall quarter what the options are. But if you cannot physically come to campus in winter, we do have a few administrative options for you to either take a quarter off or delay your return to campus, return to your studies until it is more feasible for you. So that's definitely something we would want to keep in touch about relative to your specific situation. But I think we're still a little too early for planning for winter yet, but it's a great question, and just know we have options.
Okay, great, thank you. And then the question about when will we find out if we have a morning or afternoon registration period, and is there advantage to having one or the other? So noting where they can find that.
Sure. So Schedule Builder is going to be where you look. So in Schedule Builder, when you log in, you'll be able to see the top of your Schedule Builder will have a bar in it that says Pass 1 and Pass 2. If you do not have a Pass 1 or Pass 2 visible in Schedule Builder, there may be something weird going on that we'll want to look into. But you'll either see an 8 a.m. or a 1 p.m. registration time. For those seat release courses, there's no advantage to having a morning or afternoon. We try really hard to keep it fair. But you will want to register right at that time if possible, just because that's going to give you the best access to the courses that we've been reserving for you. Registration, though, will continue through the next 2 days. So if you miss your pass time, you have a 4-hour window. So your 8 a.m. pass time will go to 11:59 a.m. and then your 1 p.m. pass time will go from 1 to, what is it, 5:59 p.m., 4:59 p.m. And then you will have an open registration period that evening from 8 p.m. to midnight. And then the following day from 6 a.m. to midnight, you'll be able to make changes. So ideally, during that first 4-hour window, you will get all of the classes that you need. But you'll also have live registration support available. We'll be working behind the scenes to answer any questions that might be coming in through our Express Advising link, so that if you don't get your first choice classes, or you are having difficulty finding classes that do not conflict, we'll work with you to make sure that you walk away from your registration period with a schedule that works for you. And even though it might look a little hard or scary at the beginning, I promise you, we always find a good schedule for every student for fall quarter. And it only gets easier from there because you get more used to our systems. So this will be the hardest registration you ever do. So if it goes easy, great. If it's a little trickier, we're here to support you. So there's no advantage with one over the other. They can't be rescheduled, unfortunately, and that's just a rule that the registrar has year round. But it is something that you'll have some opportunity to make changes if you don't get your first choices immediately.
Um,
I'm so sorry, Lisa. It might be my internet, but you're
no,
breaking
it's
up.
probably my voice. Is it better now?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. Um, I'm not sure if I understand the question. The depth about the challenge process for registering for classes, so that maybe the petition process, like, yes.
Yeah, it might be the petition process, or it might be related to a writing placement. So we do have a writing placement 2020 for our freshman students to really assess where you are in the stages of writing and composition. So if you were thinking about challenging the placement that you received as a result of taking the writing placement 2020, that's available through Canvas, and we would want to connect you with writing, the writing department, to make sure that you understand the process for that. If we're talking about the petition process for prerequisites, what you would want to do is draft your prerequisite petition in Schedule Builder before your registration time. It may include a screenshot with reference to a score or a community college course that you took that may not be showing in Oasis yet. Or you may just be explaining some experience. Once you hit submit on that petition, you will be able to register for that course during your past time. You may, though, be dropped from the course if your petition is denied. So you would want to have a backup plan just in case your petition is not approved. In certain cases, it would be approved, and in certain cases, it may not be approved, and that's going to be up to the professor. And they have some time to decide, so you may be waiting for a decision for a while, and we don't want you to be dropped from a course when it's too late to add a new one. So that's a great question and a great opportunity for you to connect with an advisor to get those kinds of questions answered and talk about what the right backup plan is for you, and maybe also discuss the likelihood of that petition being approved.
Great, we don't have any open questions at this time.
Excellent. So then I will look at changing our process to go more dynamic and start working with our Oasis. Give me 1 second. All right, so within Oasis, under forms and petitions, this is our test student. Unfortunately, our test student did not finish enough units to be in good standing. So their academic standing is showing as not in good standing, but that's a temporary status. With a few more units, Jamie Q will get right back into good standing. And so that's a good opportunity to talk with their advisor as well. But once we get in there and we get to that existing forms page, we'll want to go to submit a new form and choose that academic plan. The academic plan for Jamie right now is totally empty. So if I were working with Jamie and prioritizing a fall schedule, I will probably first put math. Math is the language of engineering. And so wherever your math placement starts, maybe you're starting in Math 12, maybe you're starting in Math 21A, maybe you have credit on the AP exam for Calc BC and you got a 5, maybe you want to start in Math 21B. Where you start is relative to your experience and confidence. We want you to feel really good about what you're taking, and we don't want the material to be so difficult that you're struggling from the beginning. So trust your placement exam scores. If you place into Math 12, go ahead and take Math 12. It's going to be a great foundation for you. For our sake, since Math 21A is the beginning of our calculus series in engineering, I'll probably put that in first. And what you'll see is there may be some other things that pop up, but those classes may not actually be available, or they may just not be appropriate for you. So Math 21A is where we recommend. If this student, let's see, she's a biological systems engineer, she's gonna wanna take EBS1. She's gonna wanna take EBS1, especially because it's only offered in fall quarter. So if she said, you know what, I don't want to take EBS1 right away, I want to take it in the winter, it should give me an error message. Huh, it did not. That's why it's tricky. And that's why you'll always want to be checking in Schedule Builder as well as the catalog to see when those classes are going to be offered and what prerequisites they may have. So the other thing that we'll want to prioritize in the first quarter is any writing. So let's say Jamie did not pass the entry-level writing requirement with SAT scores. She took the writing placement and she needs a course before going on into lower division composition. Well, she has a few different choices. She can take UWP 7, or she can take workload 57E, or she can take writing 39A. So depending on which option she chooses, she will either get 4 units or 4.5 units of credit. So that's why this is a variable unit input. If she does that, then these courses together would give her 12 to 12.5 units and put her in full-time student standing. But maybe she really also wants to take a general education course. She's really interested in languages. Maybe she wants to add linguistics 1 as well. Great. This is a good combination of major requirements as well as prerequisites for the major. So Jamie would want to work with her advisor to figure out what are the priorities for winter. Well, for her major, she'll want to take Chemistry 2A, perhaps. Chemistry 2A is not something that can move to spring quarter because it's not available. It's not taught there. So the system is telling me, hey, check with an advisor. Your plan may not work out as you want it to. So Chem 2A would be a priority for winter instead of waiting for spring. You'll see that the functionality in this form is gives you the ability to add additional courses too. This is helpful if you're taking a lot of courses that maybe instead of a linguistics class, you wanted to take a first-year seminar, and maybe she's exploring different majors and she wants to take engineering 1. Well, both of those classes are only 1-unit courses, so she's still in a reasonable number of units, but they're just taking up more independent slots. So this system allows us to sort of sketch in or draft what Jamie wants to do, and then maybe we'll save it and come back to it. So when we save the plan, it saves it as a draft. This draft is what you can continue to update and work from as you are going through your planning stages. But then also you have the ability to submit to an advisor. What this allows you to do, let's see, maybe we want to submit it to the College of Engineering instead because she's not sure about her major. It allows you to choose different departments. So if you're thinking about choosing animal science and talking to an animal science advisor, you can choose to send it to animal science, but most often you're going to be sending it to your major advisor. So that would be biological systems, or where is it? Here it is. And so if we sent it to her major advisor, then her major advisor could look over her plan and approve it. She may look over the plan and say, there's some changes I want to make. Here are my recommendations. Or she may say, hey, let's talk about this. Let's start over. So depending on the feedback that you receive from your advisor, this is how you would submit that.
So Jordan, I'm going to interject here as you're putting these classes in. One of the questions is, how do you know which courses your major requires for each quarter?
So let's go to the catalog. So the catalog will give you a complete listing of the courses required for the major. I'm going to keep using biological systems. As our example. So if I go to the Bachelor of Science tab in Biological Systems, it will give me information about the department. And when I scroll down, it will also give me information about the courses we need. So the lower division required courses lists for you by subject what the courses are that are required. What they don't necessarily tell you, though, are the prerequisites for those courses. So Math 21A and 21B actually have to come before Physics 9A because of the calculus prerequisite for physics. So many of our departments also have sample schedules. I personally have a love-hate relationship with sample schedules because not every sample schedule is appropriate for every student's either starting point or goals or capacity. Or progress. So this sample schedule gives you an idea of what courses should be taken in combination in the first quarter and potentially beyond. But that first quarter course recommendation tool for our freshmen is a great way to identify the priorities for fall quarter. But for most of our majors, we're including math, a writing course, potentially chemistry if you have a major that requires chemistry 2A, 2B, 2C. Potentially an engineering course. So for our aerospace engineers or mechanical engineers, you may be looking at adding engineering 4 for your fall quarter. For our programming majors, you're going to be wanting to take either ECS 32A with or ECS 36A, depending on your level of experience. And so the sample schedules on the individual course websites can be really helpful. But that first quarter course recommendation tool should be a good resource for you as well. And your advisors, just to confirm. Do we have any other questions?
I'm trying to, if we want to answer them live or on
Okay.
typing them in, but yes, would Schedule Builder provide the times and dates the class would normally meet, as this would avoid accidentally picking a class at the same time as another?
Yes. So Schedule Builder is actually going to tell you if there are conflicts. So let me log in here. So if I'm looking at fall quarter and I wanted to build a schedule, let's say I wanted to choose a Math 21A course. Great. These are full, or they're not showing any open seats right now, but this one's open, so I'll save this one. Great. Well, it says that it meets Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 2:10 to 3 o'clock, and it has a physical location, and then it has a discussion section at 6:10 to 7 p.m. So you'll see that these activities are different. Lecture and discussion are two different activities, meeting at different times, but for the same course. These little codes, I get a lot of questions about these codes too. The Math 21A is the course. This 3-digit code after the course number is the section number. The section number indicates who may be the professor. So the professor teaching all the C sections would be consistent. And then these sections, this giant class, if you will, that would be meeting together for the same lecture, see same time, days, activity, and location, would have separate discussion sections. So let's say you definitely wanted to take Math 21A, this particular section was full, well, this lecture time is the same, but the discussion is at a different time and potentially location. Now, some of these may transition to online locations. We're still waiting on more details on that. But because these are currently tied to specific times, I would not be able to register for any courses that also overlap with any of these days or times. So if I looked for, let's say, a chemistry class, because let's say I'm a chemical engineering major and I need chemistry, then I would choose a class. Let's see if we can find one that's open. Here we go. This is a good point. The BRO section is a repeater section. You'll see that this is just lecture. This is intended for students who did not pass the course previously. It does not have a lab because potentially those students have already passed the lab portion of the course, but did not pass the lecture component. So this section is designed for students who have already taken the course. So you would not want to choose an R section. And those are frequently the ones that have the most number of seats, but also are not including any discussion or lab. So let me pick one here. Let's say I wanted to do this one. And then now I have all my courses saved that I want to take, but I need to see how they fit together. If I go to view, in calendar view, I'll see that those classes are complementary to each other. They're right up next to each other, but they do not overlap. So I would not be prevented from registering for these two courses in sections if there were seats available at my registration time.
So there's a related question to what you're talking about is it possible to switch sections if something comes up before fall quarter where you need a different discussion time, but the same lecture time?
Yes. So if we go back to, list view, if I was registered for a course and I wanted to go into a different course or a different section under the same course number, if I was registered for the class, it would give me different options here. The drop down for the actions button, once you're registered for the class, would include a swap section feature. Swap section allows you to stay enrolled in the one that you're in and switch into an open seat in a different section without having to leave the seat that you were previously occupying. So say that very quickly a seat became available, you wanted to get into it, but someone beat you to it. You wouldn't have to give up the seat that you were already in order to swap into the one you wanted by using the swap section feature. So rather than dropping a class and then adding it, it allows you to keep your seat if something happens before you're able to swap. If that seat is still available at the time you want to swap it, it's an easy swap. You don't have to drop or add anything.
Great. And just for folks several folks have had this similar questions, and just I've typed it in the chat, but making sure that people are referencing the answered questions, that our panelists are answering those questions as they're coming up. So you're welcome to see the answers, and you might find that you may have similar questions.
Great. Okay. So that is all the prepared material that I had for today. We still have a few more minutes before our webinar is scheduled to complete. Our experts are still available, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And if you have any additional questions, please feel free to keep submitting them. If we have answered all of your questions and you don't have any more at this time, thank you so much for joining us. I hope this information was helpful. We will be offering webinars at the same time next week and the following to cover GE and general education requirements and questions relative to being an engineer. And then also the following week, we will be discussing Schedule Builder and troubleshooting some of the things that we were talking about with Schedule Builder and the actual registration process right before you get ready to register. So feel free to go if you are done with getting your questions answered, but if you have more, please let us know.
Okay, so we do have a few more questions coming in.
Oh, great.
What if there are courses which have lab sessions, but you aren't able to attend them as you're not on campus?
Some labs were available online during spring quarter. So chemistry was able to transition their labs online. Some labs were not available to be completed online. And those sections were canceled for spring quarter. So it's very possible that there will be an online option or version of your lab. And again, we're hoping that we'll get the ability to be able to identify which courses would be required in person, optional in person, or completely online. We're waiting for that information on a course by course basis, but we have been reassured, and I think I can speak very confidently that the classes that will be offered in your first quarter as a freshman will be accessible to you online. For our transfer students, it may be a little bit more complicated, but we're working on making everything as user-friendly and available to you as possible as time and space permits. So we don't want to disadvantage you in any way, no matter where you are.
Okay, great. Another one that will be helpful really quick, are the meetings next week at the same time, same link for this time?
I wish I knew. So we're hoping to get a permanent webinar license. Right now we're borrowing this one from some colleagues on campus. And so if we're borrowing this link again, we'll let you know. But if we get a new link, we'll also send that information out. So thank you for the question. We will be posting that or probably online, and then we'll also watch your email. That's a way that we communicate with you the most.
And then another question, a couple of folks have had it, and I answered one, I typed the answer, but will I be able to review this webinar somewhere?
Yes, we will be posting it to our incoming student website. So as soon as we're done and it downloads, which can take several minutes, we'll get this up so you can reference it. Absolutely. I'm glad to know it was helpful.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we've kind of answered this question, but maybe not everyone heard it. It might have come on at different times, but and I think we've addressed it a couple of times, just the availability of classes for people with different pastimes. So just reassuring that there will be enough classes.
Yeah, believe it or not, there's going to be a lot of change in registration between now and the start of classes. So for your Pass 1, we do reserve seats in the classes that are most popular for students in our major. So those are going to be your writing classes, or not your writing classes, I'm sorry, your math classes, your chemistry classes, things like that. So what you see available now may be very different than what you see just before your pastime. The best thing to do is to log into your system early, probably about an hour before your registration time, just to make sure that the sections that you've chosen still have open seats. If seats changed, then look for a different section. 1 hour prior to your registration, you should be able to see exactly what seats you will be registering for. If those seats get swooped up before you can get them, don't panic, have a backup plan, and we can work with you to make sure that you're in an appropriate schedule. So if you have not yet had your Aggie 101, or I'm sorry, your Aggie advising appointment with a one-on-one with your advisor, it's a great time to do that, just to talk about some backup plans. If you have had a meeting with your advisor already, it might be a good idea to just research some general education courses that you might be interested in, and we'll talk about which ones would be good next week. But there's still going to be some flexibility. So do your best to register in a full-time schedule, which is 12 units. During Pass 1, you can go up to 15 or 16 perhaps, but I would keep it somewhere between 14 and 16. Don't go above that. The system won't allow you to register for more than 17, so Pass 1 will be 17 or less. And then we can make changes as open registration comes along. But again, we'll have Aggie Live registration support while you're registering, just in case those questions come up.
Okay, another one, will final exams be online as well?
That's a great question. So in spring quarter, all final exams were online, but from course to course and professor to professor, there were different formats. Some courses had completely take-home finals, which meant that you had a period of time to see a prompt and respond. Others had timed experiences that were associated with a very specific time frame that opened at a specific time and then closed at a specific time. So your professors will be the ones to determine what your final format is, but you should know very early on, either in the course or prior to registration, what the time frame will be for that course. If you don't see a specific time for the final, it means that it is going to be a more independent format that isn't going to have a time specific requirement.
Okay, another question you kind of referred to as you were explaining the choosing classes on Schedule Builder, but the difference between sections and lectures when choosing classes. So how do you know what's the difference between those? Like if you look at Math 21 and all the different sections.
Great question. So if I go back to my search feature, what you'll see here is that Math 21A has A sections, B sections, C sections, D sections, E, and so on. What you'll see is that each of those groups of A's, B's, C's, D's are broken up into 1, 2, and so on. That means that the A sections are all sharing a lecture. So that's when the professor is typically presenting new information and teaching lessons associated at that time. Then that larger group is breaking out, if you will, into smaller groups. And the smaller group is where the discussion happens. So it's less one-sided and more interactive in theory. If we were looking at the difference between a lecture and a discussion. So think of this as like large group learning, and then think of this as small group discussion, smaller group. They're not teeny tiny, but it's much smaller than your overall lecture. And sometimes professors will change from A sections to B sections. Sometimes professors will have several different lecture times, and sometimes they'll only have one. It just depends on how the course is broken up. So TBA will eventually be filled in with the name of the professor, but it may not be until we get closer to fall quarter. But the department has said, we are going to be teaching this class at this time, and giving students the ability to register for those classes, but they haven't assigned a professor yet.
Okay. Again, we're getting lots of questions about pastimes and not getting into classes. You know, am I going to be able to get into classes? Getting during their pastimes and knowing which courses are online. So again, just reiterating that process could be helpful possibly.
Yeah, so I think in terms of which classes will be online, you can expect that the majority of classes will either be online or have an online option. We don't know which classes yet will not have those online options. So we're waiting for more guidance ourselves in that. And I think it's going to have to come closer to the beginning of the quarter, partially because we're waiting for more information as we get closer from our state and local governments to manage the health and safety of our campus. So putting together a bunch of plans with a lot of specifics right now may have to be derailed if things change very quickly in our state. So we're moving toward more detail, but it's too soon to give a finalized version of a plan yet. But that information will be shared as soon as we can. We know that it's really important. It's important for us too, because we want to give you all good advice. So we're really motivated to get those answers as well. But you can assume that for the majority of classes that are listed in Schedule Builder right now, either they will be exclusively online or have an online option for students who require it. I forgot the other part of that question. Oh, seat release and availability of courses. So when I started in the college, there was a lot of folklore around math classes and math classes being very difficult to get into. And over the years that I've been in the college, I've seen how much work has been put into getting students the classes that they need from the beginning. This university is very motivated to get you in the courses that you need. That might not happen right away in terms of Pass 1 registration. And part of that is because as much as we try to predict who's going to need which classes, sometimes we have to wait and see what students are able to get into and what they're still waiting for. So Pass 2 is very valuable because that's where we get to see who's waiting to get into a course. So wait lists will open up during your Pass 2 time, and that is how we communicate, we meaning the students, communicate to the department, hey, there's a lot of us who want this class. And then the departments get to work behind the scenes to see, is this a section that can be extended? Can we open it up to more students? Is it a class that we can add a whole new section so that we can accommodate many more students? What we look for is the opportunity to teach you, but a lot of that is a supply and demand conversation. So if you need a class that you are unable to get into in first quarter, chances are you'll be able to take it in the future without any negative consequence. It's rare that we have students really struggling to get into their prerequisite courses. It may take a little bit of creativity in Pass 2. It may take a little bit of follow-up from the wait list, but usually our students are not falling behind because of course availability. So that's where prioritizing is really important, making sure that you know which classes are the first ones that you should target, and then prioritizing those as best you can. But we do our best to make sure everything is as fair as possible so that students are getting the classes that they need so that they can progress through their degree.
Okay, great. I just want to be mindful of the time that we're a little over 10:30. So I think a few folks have stayed with us here, but we've had a lot of folks drop off, and so might want to wrap it up.
All right, so thank you all so very much for joining us. We do hope that this has been helpful, and maybe we can include a link to our engineering undergrad email box in the chat or in the Q&A, so that if you have questions later, feel free to keep in touch with us. We're always happy to answer your questions. We'd much rather you have accurate information than fear of the unknown. Thank you all so much.